Well, let's stick with this story for the time being. Husain Haqqani is former ambassador of Pakistan to the United States and now with the Hudson Institute. He joins us from Washington. Mr. Haqqani, thank you very much for being with us. How do you assess these gains by the Taliban?
Well, they prove three things. First, that there was no peace process. It was an illusion. And the Taliban are not amenable to peace. They basically thought that an American withdrawal meant that they had won, and they just wanted to establish their emirate all over again. Second, that the Taliban are not just a small insurgent force. They are a force that is capable of fighting like a conventional army, which basically means somebody is behind them and is supporting them and showing them the way to behave like a conventional army. And thirdly, that the Afghan military has been left without air cover by the sudden withdrawal of the Western forces. All through the 20 years that the Americans and the Brits and everybody else were there, they all did not build a strong enough Afghan Air Force and made the Afghan Air Force totally dependent on contractors who have now been withdrawn. The Taliban have also killed Afghan pilots while off duty in a very methodical manner to make sure that there is no air power on the side of the government. So if anybody wants the Taliban to not take over Afghanistan by force, they have to abandon the so-called peace process and actually get round to supporting the Afghan military.
There's a couple of points you made there. The Taliban are not a small fighting force and that they struggle to cope without international... The Afghan government forces struggle to cope without international support. Can they hold back the Taliban?
I think that the Afghan people will not accept the Taliban easily. There will be resistance. What we are headed towards is civil war. The assumption that the Taliban, just by being invited to the Ritz-Carlton in Doha, will agree to ending war has proven wrong. If I was one of the negotiators of that agreement, I would by now have resigned out of shame. But I think that the Afghan people will eventually resist. The Taliban are not going to have it as easy as they seem to be having right now. Even if they establish control in parts of the country, the people will definitely resist them over the long term. So what we will have is a prolonged civil war instead of a ceasefire.
There were always concerns about what would happen when international forces withdrew from the country. Lashkar is almost a case in point. Once home to British troops, they left and the Taliban made advances on the area. Does the international community bear some responsibility for almost enabling this?
Absolutely. The two governments in Washington, D.C. and London both actually are responsible for this. They withdrew very suddenly. They did not give the Afghan government the respect that should be given to an ally. The withdrawal should have been negotiated with the ally, not with the attacker or with the insurgent. Instead, a deal was signed with the insurgents on the assumption that they will, quote unquote, reduce peace, which was an absurd term invented by diplomats who have no respect for human life in Afghanistan, obviously, because what does reduction in peace, reduction in war mean, or reduction in conflict mean? Reduction in violence would be what? We will kill 20 people instead of 40. That was a very absurd notion. So the peace deal that was signed, the very a peace deal in which the Taliban had virtually no obligations and the Americans made a commitment to withdraw, the signers of that deal definitely bear the responsibility for the terrorism that awaits the Afghan people as the Taliban march on.
And how does this affect the future of potential peace talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government?
First of all, there are no peace talks. There is an illusion of peace talks. The Taliban have been consistently saying, and if you just read the Taliban media, and there is a Taliban media, they say the Americans have lost. We have given them a face saver, in return for which we hope that they will give us something by means of economic or other assistance later. And these people, we are prepared to have a broader shura, which means a consultative body in which we will accommodate non-Taliban. But basically, it's our victory. That is never the basis of peace talks. These peace talks have just been a fig leaf for a withdrawal. which was dictated by domestic politics in the US and the UK, and understandably so. But it could have been done in a more honorable way, a way in which the Afghan people were not let down, and unfortunately they have.
Husain Haqqani, former ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, thank you very much for being with us.